this was awful from Norwich. One of the worst performances I've seen from a team in a Championship playoff game because they just didn't turn up at all.
It's a huge disappointment and a massive, I wouldn't say a letdown, but that sort of
I think it's a letdown, Justin. I think a letdown's a fair
it probably is.
analysis.
I maybe try not to be too harsh because I thought Leeds were that bloody good. 4 shots on goal, barely any possession. It wasn't really much to shout about, to be honest with you.
Hello and welcome to the Second Tier Podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks and I'm joined by the Angus Gunn to my Elan Meslier. It's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
Look at us, Justin, recording fresh off the back of the first playoff semi-final, second leg. And you know what? It was a lot more entertaining than the first, wasn't it?
It made up for it, didn't it? It made up for it. We hung on in there, we stuck it out, and we got goals. I mean, a lot more one-sided goals than I thought it'd be, but we got goals.
Yeah, I was just happy with any goals, to be honest. So the fact that we got 4...
Just a shot on target.
Yeah, basically, yes. That's all I was asking for. Staying up this late to watch all this and recording this late, that's all I wanted from this game. Welcome to the number one Championship podcast, the Second Tier. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. Yes, we are going to be talking about Leeds absolutely trouncing Norwich very shortly. But before we get on to the playoff semi-final reaction, Justin, we have some huge news. The Second Tier Podcast is going live, baby. Next Thursday, the 23rd of May, we are bringing you our first ever live show. Yes, that's right. We're doing a bumper preview of the Championship playoff final. Expect hot takes, hot debates, plenty of audience interaction so that you can get involved in the conversation, and there may be a surprise or two along the way. Plus our friends at SBK will be there handing out free bets for the final. If that doesn't entice you, I don't know what does. So come join us next Thursday, May the 23rd, at the Horniman at the Hayes. What are you smoking at, Justin?
Sorry, I need to laugh a little bit just to get it out.
I don't know what you're on about.
No.
It's a stone's throw from London Bridge and right on the bank of the River Thames. Doors open at 7 p.m. and the show will kick off at 7:30. And you know what? You get a whole evening of entertainment for just £5. £5, ladies and gentlemen. 5 of your finest English sterling. So what better way to spend the Thursday night before the final with your pals at the Second Tier. Hit the link in the show notes of this very episode to get your seat. There's only a very limited allocation, so you better be quick. Come join us next Thursday at the Horny Man.
2 virgins, 1 horny man. Let's go.
Justin, you excited?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be at the horny man.
Yes, as am I. We look forward to seeing you then, ladies and gentlemen. Let's look at the first playoff semi-final that we've had delivered on our doorstep, Justin. Leeds United, they're on their way to Wembley. It's after thumping Norwich City 4-0. It's the heaviest defeat in a second-tier playoff game since the year 2000. Wow. And it's got to be said, it's pretty easy, wasn't it?
It was simple. It was surprisingly simple. I was expecting a really cagey game. The cagiest of games. I was expecting Norwich to really make it difficult for Leeds. And to be fair, the first goal set the stall out for Leeds because Norwich then had to come out, open themselves up a little bit. You know, the usual cliches when a team goes 1-0 up against a defensive team. That defensive team has to come out of the blocks and return. But it was just so one-sided and so simple for Daniel Farke's boys that it made that first leg look a distant memory. But also, where's this team been since March is the other question. But how easy was this? It was incredibly easy.
It was so easy, wasn't it? First of all, I'm glad it was more entertaining than the first leg. We've alluded to that already, but I was just so relieved after that first goal went in. And looking through the goals, I can only assume Angus Gunn's internet was lagging because it took him ages to react to Ilya Gruev's shot for the first goal. Justin, what was he doing?
It's quite mad, isn't it? I mean, I always hate giving it not advice but feedback on goalkeepers because I'm not a seasoned goalkeeper. I was never a goalkeeper, even playing recreationally. I was terrible at being a goalkeeper. But even I am able to identify that moving your feet that slowly and reacting that slowly to a shot on target is a dangerous thing because it could go in.
Yeah. for some reason, he left so much of his goal open.
Yeah,
I'm
that was
not
weird.
surprised Gruev decided to have a shot because he was just seemingly asking for it. And then,
well,
go on,
I was going to say, well, there was a moment before the free kick where Gruev gets a little bit of an instruction from the sideline. Not sure whether that is his goalkeeping coach telling Gruev to go for the near post or what, but it was clear instruction that Angus Gunn doesn't like his near post.
Yes, and I saw that very instruction that you're talking about there because Gruev does a very clear hand gesture where he's saying, like, he wants it to bounce in front of the goalkeeper. I can't make it any clearer on a podcast to the listeners what gesture that was, but it was so obvious what he was going to try to do from that position. And then Angus Gunn, again, caught in no man's land for the second goal. You've just got to commit if you're going to go for it. And he didn't really do either, did he? And it's not really a good look for us, is it, after we made him our second-tier goalkeeper of the season?
Well, it's on brand, isn't it? Because it's a second-tier curse. It's perfect. We curse Angus Gunn, but look, I mean, it doesn't take away from his performances this season because he's been outstanding. He has two moments of poor quality, shall we say, in the biggest of games. You've got to have a cool head. And Ellen Road's a place where you can get eaten alive, and unfortunately, the atmosphere's either going to get to Leeds players or it's going to get to the opposition players. It's going to happen either way, one or the other. And unfortunately, it impacted Angus Gunn quite significantly.
That's true, but at the same time, I actually think he massively kept the score down as well. It was a very strange game for him. Yeah, he was definitely at fault for the first two. I think he probably should have done better with the fourth goal as well, where he just parried it to Junior Firpo, who managed to put it on a plate for Somerville. But he made so many massive saves that the score could have very easily been maybe even about 6 or 7-0. That's how one-sided this was. Leeds should have definitely scored more in this one. But it is worth remembering as well that after the second goal for Leeds, straight afterwards, Josh Sargent has a golden chance from a one-on-one, and Ilhan Meslier makes an excellent save. Like, that is a game-changing kind of save, and considering he's had his stick for his recent performances and looking, well, from Leeds fans as well, and particularly in the first leg where he was looking so shaky despite not having much to do. The number of times he was just passing it out of play was outrageous. So he really stood up and made himself counted when it really mattered. But look, Justin, it was not only a brilliant performance from Leeds United, it was a really poor performance from Norwich. I think the two things can coexist here. But this is the Leeds we all know and love, isn't it? Where has this Leeds team been hiding now for the past month and a half? Yeah,
this was an aggressive, ruthless Leeds side, and it was so good to watch because I think you go as far back as the Hull game where they struggled to really overcome a stubborn Hull side before getting the penalty later on in the game and really making sure of it as well. And even going as far back as the Huddersfield game, where one of Brighton Wright's first games in charge of Huddersfield, Leeds struggled to break Huddersfield down. Huddersfield had 10 men, and they just couldn't get past them. And that's the sort of game I was expecting here. But Leeds made it look so easy, and that's a credit to them because we saw an aggressiveness that I've not seen probably since mid January. To be honest with you, this Leeds side was going for it. They were up for it. And that's why there's some hesitation from me about whether I'm going to back Leeds or Norwich, is because, well, we haven't seen this Leeds team for a long time, and also, how's the atmosphere going to swing if it doesn't go Leeds' way? Thankfully, the Gruev goal goes in when it does, because that really just relaxes the crowd. And then even better, in the 20th minute, Joel Pirro puts the ball in the back of the net, it makes it 2-0, and then everybody can relax, enjoy themselves, and will the team on basically. And I think that's the key thing. The timing of the two goals matters massively for Leeds.
Yeah, I completely agree with that just now. Could not agree more with that. Daniel Farke said after the game that he was worried about the players becoming over-emotional. And I completely understand where those fears would come from, because say if Leeds, it got to 30 minutes, Leeds still hadn't managed to break the deadlock, the nerves would have started kicking in undoubtedly just because of how poorly they've been playing recently. So them scoring that early on is absolutely massive. And then the second goal just really boosted the confidence. And then from there, Leeds were off and flying, weren't they? They had really taken off and were basically on their way to Wembley as soon as that second goal went in. I think it was one of those games as well where the crowd really helped Leeds, and we were talking on Wednesday, weren't we, about the importance of the Ellen Road home crowds, how when they're back in the team, fully back in the team, they can make all the difference here.
Yeah.
And they did. It certainly helped with the 2 goals as well, as we say, but this was one of the most commanding and dominant performances I've seen in a single playoff game in quite some time. And I think it's great that we've got this Leeds United side back, because put it this way, if Leeds got past Norwich, just scraped past Norwich in the semi-finals, that's not what we want, is it? We want the full flow Leeds team that we've seen all season, the side that's rightly finished third.
Yeah, if you're going to get a Leeds team, you want it to be the one that we've seen today. Because a Leeds team fumbling over themselves, as they did in some games, obviously before they got battered at QPR and lost to Southampton on the final day of the season. We don't want to see a fumbling Leeds team. You want to see a team that is swashbuckling and confident and aggressive, like Nanto's. I think it was Nanto's cross, wasn't it, for the second goal was just so pinpoint and beautiful. Yeah. And that's the sort of chances you want this Leeds side to take. It was a deep cross. How often do we see that with this Leeds team? How often do we see a cross coming in from as deep as that? And Somerville was great. It was just a team that was confident. Joe Rodon won the free kick, didn't he? Because he was pushing forward, dribbling with the ball forward. Ball playing centre half. It epitomises why we picked him in our team of the season and why he's so bloody good for this Leeds side. It just felt like a team that was taking chances where they needed to take chances, and it just those chances they paid off as well. And that's what you want. That's what you want to see. And hopefully we get this Leeds team in the playoff final, because playoff finals can be hard watches. But if this Leeds team is turning up as it is, it won't be.
Yeah, absolutely. The only disappointing thing from a Leeds perspective is that they didn't win by more. And they really should have, shouldn't they? Honestly, I don't think I'm being over dramatic when I say that they should have scored at least 6. And that's how dominant this showing was from Leeds. But as we say, it is also, you can combine it with Norwich just being completely off it. You have got to feel sorry for Norwich fans, haven't they? It's a pretty crap feeling, isn't it, when you've got a playoff game, you've been buzzing about it for days, all you can think about it, or all you can think about as a supporter is that game, and then it actually gets to the opening whistle, and your team just doesn't turn up at all. And that's exactly what's happened to Norwich here, isn't it, Justin?
It's so bizarre. There's so many moments, wasn't there, that just let them down. Obviously, didn't need to give the free kick away with Joe Rodon, for example. I know the chances of Gruev scoring there are quite slim. It's got to be a pinpointed free kick. It's got to be a well-hit free kick. Don't think it was neither. It was just very clever. And it's those moments that go against you that you've got to bounce back from. And obviously the mistakes from Angus Gunn, Josh Sargent bearing down on goal. If he's fully fit, 'cause obviously he's been carrying an ankle injury. If he's fully fit, does he put that away? Does he square it? Johnny Rowe as well had a moment where he was running through on goal when he decides to dive when it looked like he had the beating of the 2 defenders that didn't touch him, essentially. And it's that moment there where you think, if he stays on his feet, can he get through here? So yeah, it's a huge disappointment and a massive, I wouldn't say a letdown, but that sort of.
I think it's a letdown, Justin. I think a letdown's a fair
it
analysis.
probably is. I maybe try not to be too harsh because I thought Leeds were that bloody good, but it's such a significant disappointment, as you say. Like Norwich fans travelling all that way for a playoff semi-final second leg, and the team, I wouldn't say they fold and wave the flag a little bit, but 4 shots on goal, barely any possession. Josh Sargent absent, Ashley Barnes just trying to piss people off. It wasn't really much to shout about, to be honest, in this performance.
Yeah, well, David Wagner definitely wasn't shouting about it after the game. He said it was a poor performance from us. More or less everything you should not do, we have done. And look, we've given Leeds their flowers over the past 10 minutes or so, Justin, but I think you can also very fairly say this was awful from Norwich. I don't think I'm being reactionary here by saying it's one of the worst performances I've seen from a team in a Championship playoff final, because they just Championship playoff final, Championship playoff game, because they just didn't turn up at all. No. It was really, really poor, and it was actually quite surprising how bad Norwich were. I'm not sure the decision to drop Boya Saeens was a clever one. I didn't really see what the point in that was. I know
he was a bright spark when he came on, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but it was a bit too late by that point, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Gabriel Sara, their best player, was completely anonymous, did absolutely nothing. Johnny Rowe did not look fit here. It seems like he's been rushed back to fitness way too quickly because he's not had any impact at all in these two playoff games. And defensively, they were all over the shop. And as we were alluding to, they could have lost this by a lot more if it wasn't for Angus Gunn. At the same time, they may not have conceded as many if it was for... They may have, not conceded as many if it wasn't for Angus Gunn as well, because he didn't have a great game. And I felt so sorry for Ashley Barnes. The Leeds fans singing Ashley Barnes is fucking shit for long spells in the second half. Then he gets subbed off to loud cheers from the Leeds fans. And his face as he got subbed off, Justin, oh dear.
It's a picture. It was a picture, wasn't it? It really was a picture. I mean, he's a character anyway. He's one that you do love to hate if you're going to throw an age-old cliche out there. But I mean, he had moments where he looked quality. I mean, I mentioned the Johnny Rowe moment. It was his touch. It was his beautiful velvet touch that got the ball into Johnny Rowe, but he did slip over. And it was just typical peak Ashley Barnes fashion. But yeah, his face was a picture, and it just epitomised Norwich really, because they weren't good. Face like slapped arses, and it was a bad one.
Yeah, it really, really was a bad one. Justin, let's take a quick break. After that, we'll talk about what happens next for these two sides. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast, and it's now time for us to see how our Second Tier bet builder with SBK got on from Wednesday's preview show. And this is what we had. Leeds to keep a clean sheet. Good start. Leeds to win. Yes. Crescencio Somerville to score any time. Yes. Leeds to score under 2.5 goals. Justin Peach, for God's sake.
It's not my fault Norwich threw in the towel.
You picked it.
It's not my... I did pick it, but did I expect Norwich to throw in the towel? No. Did I expect Angus Good to throw the game away for Norwich? No.
Throw the ball in the goal.
did everything but, didn't he? So Angus Gunn, don't hang your head in shame. That's really mean, actually. If you've had a bad game, you're probably going to feel it. But you've cost me plaudits, Angus.
Yeah, and that's the big crime here. Not you've cost your team a place in the playoff final. You've cost our second tier bet builder. We were so close.
You've made me
yet
look
again,
a knob.
ladies and gentlemen. Oh, dearie me. Well, let's talk about what's next for these two sides, Justin. Of course, we'll have a deep dive into Norwich very, very shortly. But you've got to say, considering how impressive Leeds United were here, Justin, this performance will have well and truly struck fear into Southampton and West Brom, won't it? They would have both fancied their chances against Leeds the way that they've been playing over the past few weeks. Now, of course, they've still got their own semi-final to deal with, but they won't be as confident heading into that final, will they, whoever wins?
Well, if you look at it in the sense that West Brom will probably have a similar game plan to what Norwich's game plan was sit back, let Leeds play in front of you. But Leeds finally, for me, showed a way that they can get around it, albeit it was from that Gruev free kick, but they showed a way of getting around it. And they were relentless. They were relentless. And they'll do the same thing against West Brom side, who will let Leeds have the ball. And then you've got Southampton, who leave gaps. They're not defensively superb, are they? They don't keep a lot of clean sheets. And they come against a Leeds team who... they're bloody sharks in the water. They smelt blood. They're coming. They are coming. And they've got Premier League in their sights. And when that happens, if anything gets in the way, they just go through it. And Southampton or West Brom, they will go through you. They will go through you. And it's this scary sight, as you said. It's a one that they won't be thinking about it now, obviously, because they've got a big game themselves to come up with. But that final becomes a lot tougher if this Leeds team turns up.
Yeah, well, it all depends on what Leeds team turns up, doesn't it? Because we have seen it before where they pull this kind of performance out of the bag but then follow it up with not very much. Yeah. Southampton will obviously have the thing in the back of their mind that they have beaten Leeds twice this year. But still, Leeds were just so damn good, and they look back to the Leeds of old. So is this a corner turn for them? We won't find out until a week on Sunday, which is frustrating, and I imagine will be something that will shove the nerves straight back into the Leeds fans over the coming days. But if you're a Leeds fan and of course you want to get to the playoff final, that's the main thing here, but you're looking for a good performance as well, aren't you? And they more than got that, and that's encouraging, isn't it? Because now Leeds fans will be thinking, right, we've got our Leeds back, Justin.
It gives you confidence. It gives you confidence. It gives us confidence in Leeds that they can go out and go again. So maybe predicting that playoff final becomes a little bit easier because, as I say, predicting the playoffs coming into these set of games was almost impossible because every team, to put it bluntly, was pretty shit. Yeah. But then this Leeds team turns up and you go, well, hang on, that's the Leeds we've been looking at between September and the end of February. They turn up. If that team turns up, then yeah, it becomes a lot easier because I would back that Leeds team. I backed that Leeds team to go for the title for as long as they did until they really truly bottled it. But now they're in this position. They're confident. They're coming off the back of a 4-0 win against a good Norwich team. It's worth pointing out this Norwich team is a good side, and they made them look like relegation fodder. They made it look so simple, so easy. So yeah, that game for either one of those sides, West Brom, Southampton, yeah, it becomes a worry.
Yeah, and the front four are all confident again. That's the scary thing, isn't it? They've been so flat recently, but now this spark has really brought them back to life, and that's the exciting thing. One quick side note, which we probably will talk about more once we figure out where Leeds are going. The Daily Mail says Leeds will have to raise up to £100 million in player sales if they fail to win the playoffs. So that's one thing that's on the line here, as well as, obviously promotion and all the riches that comes with it. But we'll, of course, be talking about this loads over the next week and a bit, won't we, Justin? So we'll have more of a preview of the final coming in your podcast feeds as we go on, ladies and gentlemen. But it's another season in the Championship for Norwich City, Justin. So the question is, what next for them? It feels like we could see a summer of change coming up.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think either one of these teams, it's quite a unique situation. Obviously, you've got Leeds and Southampton, who are first-year parachute payment teams. Then you've got Norwich and West Brom, who are final-year parachute payment teams. So, Norwich are going into their final-year parachute payments. Actually, West Brom are coming. They'll lose their final-year parachute payments. So actually, they're in a sticky situation financially themselves, albeit new ownership. But more on Norwich is that, yeah, they're going to be in a position where their revenue completely drops once again. And obviously keeping hold of a Gabriel Sara, who's just had the season that he's had, is going to be very difficult. Josh Sargent's already been linked with clubs. He's been heavily linked with Brentford on several occasions, and I'd be surprised if that speculation doesn't surface once again. Johnny Rowe is probably likely to be, subject of inquiries. And then you've got Shane Duffy, Ben Gibson, who are old and looked, they looked old and haggard in this game, for example. Leeds made them look very, very average. So again, it's a situation where Norwich almost feels like it's going to be a reset situation. One that you predicted last summer or suggested last summer that they needed. They probably need it again. I know it's off the back of a season finishing the playoffs, but can this team finish higher than what they did this season? No, I think it's going to be even harder for them. And that's, I think the positive there is Ben Napper, sporting director, has got time to plan. He's had time to plan, now he's got to execute it. So that's one positive I'll throw in there.
Yeah, well, it is going to be very interesting to see who stays and goes. You mentioned Sargent and Rowe. Gabriel Sara, he's simply too good to be playing at this level, isn't he? So I imagine he may be another one who attracts quite a bit of interest. If they lose Sara, Sargent, Rowe, I'd be surprised if they lost all three of them this summer. But if you take them out of the team, that squad's looking seriously average, isn't it? And it's going to be really difficult to replace their star quality. So it's a real big test for the new sporting director, Ben Napper, this summer. He's been thrown right in at the deep end, really, hasn't he? It's going to be interesting as well to see what happens with David Wagner, whether he stays or not. As far as I'm aware, he's still on a 12-month rolling contract. May the club look at it as a chance for a fresh start? Might David Wagner fancy a change? Despite all he's achieved this season, he's still not the most popular of managers they've ever had, is he? And he was actually speaking to Sky after the playoff semi-final. He said, "I think it's clear there have to be conversations on my side, so we will see." So, doesn't sound like the most convincing sign that he's going to stay. Justin, what do you think?
It's a shame, isn't it? I think he's had a good season. It could have been really poorly. I predicted them to be very average, finish sort of 17th, 18th, quite low in the championship table. And at one point, you got to about October, November time, it looked like that was going to be the case. But then results picked up Players' form picked up, player injuries, players came back from injury, and they looked a really good team. So, for me, I do think David Wagner has earned an opportunity to keep Norwich going next season, if you like. Keep the Norwich job, I should say. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Ben Napper does actually now want to bring in his own man, because I think Ben Napper, with the timing of his appointment coming in November, was very difficult, because that's when there's a lot of turbulence at the club, a lot of discontent towards Wagner, a lot of discontent towards the ownership, and then Ben Napper's just caught in between a rock and a hard place, isn't he? But now he's had an opportunity to look at things, see things his way, and maybe wants to get in his own man. Who knows? But I do, from my opinion, think Wagner does deserve the chance to carry on next season.
Yeah, it is funny with Wagner, isn't it? Because if you go back on Twitter to 12 months ago and look at other people's, predictions from the start of the season, and, keep in mind that around autumn time, it looked almost a certainty that David Wagner was going to go. The fact that we are talking about them now losing in a playoff semi-final, for them to get into the top six is
massive,
amazing, isn't it? But it doesn't feel like he maybe gets the credit, because he's not the most popular of Norwich managers, and because I suppose he's a bit of an unfashionable kind of coach as well. I don't know. Do you know what I mean, Justin? Because what he's done this season is genuinely quite remarkable. Of course, it's ended in disappointment, but no one would have predicted Norwich to finish in the top six in autumn time, and that's exactly what they did. So he deserves a lot of credit for that.
He does deserve a lot of credit. He honestly, he really does. And I was banging the Wagner drum for a long time, wasn't I? He needed to stay at the club to guide it through a turbulent period, and he did. And he came out the other side in a very lovely place. Top six finish is that very lovely place, isn't it? So he's done an incredible job. He has done an incredible job, but I do think it might be a case of Ben Napper wanting his own man. I think that's the brutality of it. I think you look at Liam Rossini, who's lost his job for just finishing outside the playoffs. That's how brutal it can be. So David Wagner losing his job despite finishing the playoffs, it just wouldn't surprise me. It just wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Well, I could understand why Ben Napper, the sporting director, would want to bring in his own man. If you're looking for a long-term option, then starting again, bringing in someone who you fully believe in as the sporting director would certainly make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? So it wouldn't surprise me if that did happen. But I think he certainly has credit in the bank when it comes to his next job, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's back in the Championship with someone else. Justin, you got something to say?
Well, I was going to make a point about David Wagner's style of play not being particularly, I wouldn't say sustainable, but it doesn't speak of a long-term project. It's very much plays a 4-2-3-1, grinds games out, utilises the best individual quality that he's got at his hands. Where you look at Daniel Farker, who ironically has just beaten Norwich, there's a very ingrained style of play there. It's high press, it's get forward, it's be attacking, it's not too defensively focused, or it wasn't at Norwich anyway. So it's whether or not they want to go back to that model as well. That might be another thing that's in Ben Napper's mind, is he wants a style of play, he wants a philosophy to be ingrained within the club. Don't think Wagner quite delivers that. I think he delivers results, but not a style of play.
I think that's another fair point, Justin, as well. And there is a certain irony to the fact that Norwich have just been beaten in a playoff semi-final by the manager that they got rid of. They sacked 2 years ago now
for Dean Smith.
For Dean Smith, yes, that seemed like a wise move at the time, didn't it? And that's unfortunately the position Norwich City are in now. They've got to try and pick up the pieces, haven't they, after this season? One final thing that I'll ask you, Justin. Chris Sutton, the most cheerful man on earth, he was talking about Norwich after the game. And he did say something interesting. Obviously, he's got his Norwich allegiances, but he said, I'm glad this Norwich side aren't getting promoted. And the reason for that was because he simply didn't think they were ready. And he is right, isn't he? If Norwich did get to the Premier League, I feel like they could have had an even worse, even poorer season the past 2 seasons they've had in the Premier League. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I get the notion. I understand the sentiment behind it. A lot of teams get promoted before they're ready. Blackpool did it. Blackpool got promoted, didn't they, all those years ago? And they were a great side to watch. They ended up getting relegated, but they were a great side to watch. Burnley are a good example of getting promoted at probably a season too soon. There are a lot of young players that needed to develop, and again, they with a game to go, was still a Premier League side. So I don't really buy into that. I don't think the Premier League at the bottom half of the table is overly competitive. I think there are teams that will get dragged down into it next season again. And I do think this Norwich team, with Ben Napper in charge, he might have had a trick up his sleeve that Stuart Webber never had.
That's the case. And you've got to keep in mind, he would have had to keep David Wagner because he's the man who would have got them promoted. Would you have fancied a David Wagner team to stay up in the Premier League nowadays?
Well, he did something that Daniel Farke has never done. He has kept a team in the Premier League.
Yeah, 6 years ago.
Doesn't matter. He's got that on his CV, and he did it. He did it doing it his way as well. It was boring. It was sometimes very bland, but he kept a team in the Premier League.
Paul Jewell kept a team in the Premier League.
Yeah, that was a good Wigan side. Don't bring up that Wigan side because I'll talk about that Wigan side for 3 months.
So you're saying Ipswich should get rid of Kieran McKenna and get Paul Jewell back, should they?
100%. Absolutely. If you want to stay in the Premier League, get David Wagner or Paul Jewell in charge. There you go.
There you go. You've heard it from the horse's mouth, ladies and gentlemen. And I think Sutton is right. If Norwich were going to go up, I think they would have been absolutely massacred. So I think it's.
Well, they did.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that they've missed out on the playoffs. Of course, Norwich fans would have wanted to go up, and it would have been interesting to see how they do. But I couldn't have seen it going particularly well because David Wagner would be in charge. This side would need a hell of a lot of additions. And while they have got two definitely Premier League players in the form of Josh Sargent and Gabriel Sara, maybe Johnny Rowe as well, although he is still quite raw, he would have been way too much, I think. Plus, Ben Napper, we're talking about him having been thrown in the deep end a bit with this summer, having to pick up the pieces after this season. Imagine if he was taking them into the Premier League, just in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, well, as I say, he'd have had a trick up his sleeve. He kept hold of David Wagner for start. That was a good decision. Kept it cool, and David Wagner could have been the man to take the team to the Premier League. So that would have been one decision vindicated, and the second one, buying players. Yeah. Well, that's certainly his task now, isn't it? Buying players, seeing who they can bring in, and seeing what they can keep hold of in the summer. So that's Norwich City's season over. But Leeds United, they keep rolling on all the way to Wembley, and we'll be giving you plenty of coverage of the playoff final over the next week and a half, ladies and gentlemen. But we'll be back tomorrow, We'll be back tomorrow with fresh off the press reaction to Southampton v West Brom in the other playoff semi-final. That'll be coming straight after the game. As it ends, hopefully it doesn't go to extra time, Justin, because we won't be doing this too late, can we? It is a weekend.
It is a weekend. Not how I expected to be spending my Friday night, but you know what? I'm here for it because this is what the playoffs is all about, baby. So this has been the Second Tier Podcast, and a quick reminder that our first ever live show is going to be coming very soon, ladies and gentlemen. Next Thursday, the 23rd of May, at the Horny Man at Hayes. Nothing to say there, Justin? Okay. It'll be our bumper preview show of the Championship playoff final. Hot takes, hot debates, plenty of audience interaction, and maybe a few surprises or two along the way. And of course, SBK handing out free bets as well. So make sure you sort out tickets. You can find the link to that in the description of this podcast, and we look forward to seeing you then for that. But we also look forward to seeing you over the next few days, ladies and gentlemen, because we have got plenty of action coming up for you here on the Second Tier. So make sure you stay tuned. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.